great to have you with us. Joining us now, Republican Congressman from the 1st District of Virginia, Rob Wittman. Dr. Wittman, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. It's great to be with you.
Let's start with the Canadian situation in Ottawa. What have you heard? What do you make of it?
Well, initially we've heard that the individual involved in the attack there is an individual that converted to Islam. There's concern there about him being converted to be an extremist, and that he acted out that extremist viewpoint there in the attack in the Parliament there in Canada, and with the murder of a Canadian soldier there. Just reprehensible, and another reminder of the vigilance that we have to practice as a nation against this Islamic extremism. I mean, this is a danger, whether it's en masse by Islamic extremist groups or by lone wolves. And I think we have to be mindful that all of these elements are threats that we have to deal with. And if we aren't mindful of that, and if we aren't vigilant, and if we don't work to defeat extremism wherever we find it, Islamic extremism, wherever we find it, then we will not win this battle. And believe me, these individuals are committed to killing those folks that don't believe in the extremist or fundamentalist form of Islam that they believe. And it's clear they are unambivalent about that. We need to be as serious in defeating that as they are in coming after us.
Congressman Wittman, what's the level of anxiety for the U.S. here? You look at what happened in Canada. It's tough to get into Canada, all right? I mean, if everybody's ever tried to get in there, I mean, it's just not – you don't just walk over. It's relatively easy, as you know, to get into the United States because we have no sovereignty in the South, no border security really to speak of. We all know that's reality. I mean, as we're speaking now, people from ISIS or ISIS sympathizers could be coming over. Why does the Obama administration refuse to do anything to shut down our borders to the South? Why?
Well, John, there's no good reason why. There's no compelling reason why we should not be securing our borders, and that is to make sure that only folks coming into this country legally are coming across the borders, and we can do that. You know, some folks say, we can't build thousands of miles of fence. Well, we don't have to do that. We have other means of technology to detect people coming across. We also have our Border Patrol officers that, if given the proper charge, can do the job. Unfortunately, many of them are now being directed into other areas and not there on the border. There are things we can do, very simple and straightforward, to secure the border. It is an issue of homeland security. It's an issue of national security. It's an issue that we see is a weakness that extremists can exploit, and why we would not want to take that up and protect our citizens is beyond me. There is no logical reason why we are not doing that. That is the most fundamental job of the federal government, is protecting its citizens, and we protect the citizens by making sure threats in the form of Islamic extremists and others. I mean, there may be others too, criminals that come across the border. Those are public safety issues.
Sure.
You know, why we wouldn't want to secure the border is illogical, and it is, to me, the paramount job of the federal government to do that.
Congressman, let's get to the Ebola response. One thing I want to mention is over the weekend, the president called up additional National Guard resources, he says, in order to fight Ebola. Can you help our audience understand the rationale behind that?
Well, what he was doing was calling up National Guard units to go to Africa, and he can get them there more quickly than active duty units. And what will happen is they'll go there, and then active duty military units will replace them when they're there. That mission is a build and manage mission, and I question, first of all, the mission, and we've gotten the details on the mission, and what we're going to do to make sure we protect our men and women in uniform. We have an obligation to do that. Now, I can tell you, our men and women in uniform have extensive training to protect themselves against nuclear, biological, and chemical attacks. So I do believe that they have the training. The question is what situations are we going to be putting them in, and how do we make sure we're managing risk? The question also becomes what's the exact value of our role there in this build and manage mission? I want to understand more about that and what ultimately happens out of that improves the effort to stop this pandemic of Ebola there in Africa. I'm not particularly clear with how all that comes about. I know folks are being sent over there. The key is then, how does the construction take place? Is it the members of the military that are going to be doing all the construction? How are those things happening? I mean, I can understand a managed part of that, but if we're going to be part of that direct mission, I want to understand the details of it. And of course, we're getting the details as we speak, but putting National Guard troops over there, and I want to make sure again that our National Guard troops are properly trained for this, because some of those units may not have the same what they call NBC training, nuclear, biological, and chemical training, as our active duty troops. So I think there's still questions that need to be answered, ones that we are asking as members of the House Armed Services Committee.
The Obama administration's response to Ebola overall, do you think it is effective? Do you think we should be banning people from coming in from West Africa?
Well, John, I spent 27 years in public health, and I wrote a letter to the president last week, emphatic that there needs to be a travel ban to the United States from these West African countries that have Ebola present in their countries. I can tell you, if you look at the epidemiology of this disease, of Ebola, it is spread person to person. The only way you stop the spread of this disease is to control person-to-person contact, which means individuals that have the disease need to be isolated. If you allow those individuals to come to the United States, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, we will have another outbreak of disease. So to me, if you are serious about making sure that there's not an outbreak of disease and potentially a pandemic here in the United States, which is an uncontrolled outbreak of disease, then you want to restrict travel. And to me, it's fairly simple. You say, listen, we are not going to issue travel visas to anybody from these countries to come into the United States until those countries have addressed the pandemic of Ebola in their countries. I think that's a very simple public health measure. We cannot detect whether or not those individuals have the Ebola virus coming into the United States, because if they are in the incubation period and not exhibiting the symptoms of the disease, that is that first 21 days, I don't care what you do, you cannot detect the disease. And if we can't do that and those folks are coming in and they are carriers of the disease, and then they start to exhibit symptoms, they contact others, just like we've seen in this situation with the two nurses that got the disease from the individual that came here from Liberia, we see what happens. We see outbreaks. So it's very simple and straightforward. The way you stop the spread of this disease into the United States is to say no one from those countries will travel into the United States until those outbreaks are taken care of in those countries.
Congressman Wittman, that seems what you just said so incredibly logical to even the average person like me, the layman. You've spent, as you said, nearly 3 decades in public health. You wrote a letter to the president. 150 of your colleagues in the House and Senate have said that your position is the absolute right thing to do. Yet this president, Obama, continues to refuses to act on it. And we can't get a straight answer as to why. What is the downside of simply doing exactly, sir, what you just outlined?
John, I don't believe there's a downside. I've heard arguments to say, well, it'll hurt those countries. Those countries right now are in the middle of significant challenges. Restricting folks from those countries traveling here, I think, has no bearing on what they're doing to combat the disease. Now, what can happen is health professionals from the United States can travel to those countries. I believe, though, that as they come back, and remember, they'll have to get a visa to travel to that country.
Right.
I believe, though, as they come back, those individuals ought to come back on a charter flight, and they ought to be isolated for 21 days before they contact the general population. That way, we assure that if perchance they do contract the disease while they're there, they don't spread it when they come back to the general population. So we can address that. We can still have health professionals that go there. So I believe that this is manageable. I see no logical or compelling reason why you wouldn't want to restrict travel. And then when those folks are provided a visa to go to those countries to provide, whether it's advice or direct health care or whatever it may be, we can still help those countries and still protect public health here at home. I mean, to me, it's so simple and straightforward, and there's not a compelling reason to do otherwise.
Congressman, you're absolutely right. I mean, it just makes no sense, defies all logic, and I just, for the life of me, do not understand why the president simply doesn't follow this lead and institute the travel ban. Now, he named an Ebola czar, sir. We were very critical of the choice because the gentleman he named didn't really have any expertise in the area. So, again, to the layman, it looks like a purely political choice. What say you?
Well, it certainly appears that way. The individual that they picked, his background is in managing the political aspects of government operations. It's not managing accomplishment. It's not managing public health operations. It's not managing even anything in the medical realm. So you would hope that you'd have somebody that has some kind of medical background that understands this disease, understands what needs to be done amongst all the different agencies that are part of the effort to address an outbreak here in the United States. Are we ready for that? As we've seen, the CDC has sputtered at best in addressing this. So you would have hoped that would have been somebody with that type of background, that has a background in managing efforts in the area of medicine or in the area of public health. To me, that's the most logical step forward, instead of somebody that's experienced in managing political operations. I mean, to me, if you look at it from afar, it looks like it's a management of PR. It's not a management of actually of being effective in addressing this particular situation. I would be much more comfortable with somebody in there that has a background and has the experience in managing operations related to public health or issues of medicine.
It looks to me like wag the dog. Congressman Wittman, I want to get to the war. When are we going to convene Congress and have an authorization of war? Bombs continue to drop. Additional military resources are going in. There's not a clear path to victory. I don't even think we understand what victory is. When is this president going to reconvene Congress and ask for a formal declaration of war?
Well, John, I believe that needs to happen. I was hoping that the Speaker would call us back to do just that, to vote on the authorization of the use of military force, because I don't believe the authorization of the use of military force that was passed in 2002 in any way, shape, or form covers what's happening today in both Syria and Iraq. And remember, the 2002 AUMF only covered operations there in Iraq and under very, very different causation. So I want to make sure that we are having the debate about the authorization of use of military force and understand what that is. What does it entail? Airstrikes, what are those going to accomplish? What other aspects of the threat are we going to have to address? What are our strategies and tactics for doing that? I also think, too, that there needs to be a broader discussion, John, about how do we address Islamic extremism? Because if not, this ends up being what I call a whack-a-mole strategy. You go after Al-Qaeda, you weaken Al-Qaeda, and then here comes ISIS. So you go after ISIS, you weaken it, you defeat it. Hopefully, in the long run, that's what we absolutely have to do. And then you have other groups: Al-Nusra, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram. I can go down the list. Mm-hmm. So if you're only going to address these groups one at a time, then as you weaken one, another is going to then find an opportunity and pursue their efforts in the ideology of Islamic extremism. If we don't look overall and say, what are we going to do to address Islamic extremism, we'll never win this battle. And that's why I believe we need to have a broader discussion, too, about a declaration of war on this form of extremism. I think you have to be very, very specific about that and say, wherever it comes out, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to combat it, because you have to have a broader strategy if you're going to be successful in the long term. I look at the issue there with ISIS as the shorter-term issue, and what are we doing to defeat ISIS? But the longer-term strategy needs to be, what do we do to defeat Islamic extremism? And that has to be part of this discussion also.
I tell you what, Congressman Wittman, you are the chairman of the Straight Talk Express. No question. We want to thank you for being with us. Congressman Rob Wittman from the 1st District of Virginia. Congressman, if people want to sign up for your information, get involved with your campaign for re-election, where do they go?
Well, they can go to robwittman.com, just ROBWITTMAN.com, and if they want to get information about what happens up on Capitol Hill, this is not our political site, but our legislative site, they can go to www.wittman.house.gov. Both of those areas can get you the information that you need, whether it's on the political side or on the legislative side.
Thanks for being with us, sir.